We know the monster. Its scales of lethal green, its gaze a vessel of absolute death. Its name has been whispered in fear for a millennium, a ghost story given flesh and fang. But to truly understand the beast, we must first unearth the man. We must peel back the layers of legend and look into the heart of its creator, for the story of the Basilisk is not a bestiary's entry, it is the final, tragic chapter in the biography of Salazar Slytherin. To comprehend the venom, we must first comprehend the vision. Our story begins not in darkness, but in a shared, incandescent dream. In the raw, windswept highlands of 10th century Alba, where magic was as untamed as the landscape, four of the age's most formidable talents converged. Godric Gryffindor, his spirit as bright and unyielding as the summer sun. Rowena Ravenclaw, her mind a celestial map of intricate knowledge. Helga Hufflepuff, her heart a deep, fertile ground of loyalty and compassion. And Salazar Slytherin, master of the deep magic, of water and serpent, his ambition a cold, steady flame. Together, they envisioned a sanctuary, a fortress of learning to shield magical children from a world that had begun to hunt them, to burn them. They chose a rocky outcrop overlooking the vast, unknowable depths of the Black Lake, and there, they began to build. They did not use mortar and block in the way of common men. They sang to the stone, coaxing it from the earth. They wove spells of reinforcement and permanence into the very fabric of the rock, raising towers that defied gravity, halls that echoed with nascent power. In these early days, none were closer than Gryffindor and Slytherin. They were two sides of the same formidable coin, Godric, the sword arm, the courageous heart, Salazar, the strategic mind, the cunning will. They walked the battlements together as the castle rose, their conversations shaping the very soul of the institution. Slytherin's contribution was foundational, in the most literal sense. His affinity was for the deep places of the world. He anchored the castle to the bedrock, his magic flowing through the plumbing and aqueducts like a second circulatory system. He felt the castle's pulse through the cold stone, understood its secrets, its hidden cavities, its subterranean roots. He saw the castle not just as a school, but as a living entity, and he, more than any other, was its keeper. But even in this era of unity, a seed of discord was planted, a question that would ultimately fracture their great work: who, precisely, was this sanctuary for? For Godric, the answer was simple: all with magic. For Salazar, whose family had faced persecution for generations, the answer was far more complex, far more guarded. It was a question that would fester, turning a dream of unity into a blueprint for tragedy. The first fissures in their great alliance appeared not with the clang of steel, but in the quiet debates held within the half-finished Great Hall. As enchanted torches cast long, dancing shadows, the four founders argued the core philosophy of their new school. Hufflepuff spoke of loyalty and fairness, of accepting all and teaching them together. Ravenclaw championed wit and wisdom, seeking out the sharpest minds. Gryffindor, ever the idealist, declared that any child who showed magical talent and possessed a brave heart deserved a place within these walls, regardless of their parentage. It was here that Slytherin's voice, often a low and measured tone, took on a chilling intensity. He spoke not of bravery or intellect, but of preservation. He argued that to open their gates to all was to invite contamination, to welcome the very dangers they had sought to escape. His argument was rooted in a dark, pragmatic paranoia. He had seen the pyres and the pitchforks. He believed the non-magical world was a tide of suspicion that would, given the chance, erode and ultimately extinguish the flame of their kind. His focus was on blood. He contended that magical ability was a legacy, a sacred trust passed through generations, and that those born of non-magical parents, the Muggle-borns, were a vulnerability. He saw them as a gateway through which the hostile outer world could infiltrate their sanctum. To him, purity of blood was not a matter of arrogance, but of survival. "You see a gifted child, Godric," he might have argued, his voice echoing in the cavernous hall. "I see a potential crack in our armor. A link to a world that despises us. Their loyalties will forever be divided." Gryffindor would hear none of it. "A child's heart knows no such politics, Salazar. Magic is a gift, bestowed upon the worthy, not merely the well-bred. To deny them is to deny the very essence of magic itself." Their disagreement was fundamental, a clash between Gryffindor's open-hearted optimism and Slytherin's guarded, cynical realism. The others, while respecting Slytherin's power and intellect, sided with Gryffindor's more inclusive vision. Slytherin saw their decision not as a philosophical difference, but as a betrayal. He felt them choosing a path of reckless sentimentality over the hard-won wisdom of caution. And so, as they continued to build their school towards the sky, Salazar Slytherin, feeling his vision for the future being overruled, began to build his own. Secretly. Downwards. Into the silent, waiting dark beneath their feet. His descent curdled into obsession. Outwardly, he maintained a veneer of cooperation, his contributions to the castle's enchantments as potent as ever. But his mind was elsewhere, consumed by a new, clandestine project. He began his work under the guise of refining the castle's sanitation and water systems, a task for which his expertise was unparalleled and thus unquestioned. It provided the perfect cover. By night, when the castle slept and the torches in the corridors burned low, he would descend. Not to the dungeons that would one day hold classrooms, but deeper, into the raw, uncarved underbelly of the fortress. We must imagine him then, a solitary figure moving through the nascent plumbing, following the gurgle of water through stone channels, his soft boots making no sound on the damp flagstones. The air would grow colder, thick with the scent of wet earth and ancient rock. He was not merely exploring, he was listening. Listening to the deep currents of magic that flowed beneath the castle, searching for a place untouched by the others, a cavity in the earth that he could claim as his own. He found it deep below the level of the Black Lake, a series of interconnected natural caverns, sculpted by millennia of groundwater. Here, the ambient magic of the castle was different, wilder, more primal. It resonated with his own serpentine affinities. In the emerald gloom, illuminated only by the silent, cold light of his wand, the vision for his sanctum solidified. This would be more than a hidden study or a private retreat. It would be a second Hogwarts, a true Hogwarts, built according to his own unforgiving principles. It would be a monument to his philosophy, a stronghold for his true heir, and a weapon to one day purge the school of those he deemed unworthy. The grand project of the Founders above became a distant echo. Down here, in the crushing silence, surrounded by the patient stone, Salazar Slytherin began to draw his own blueprints, not on parchment, but in the theatre of his mind. He was no longer a co-founder. He was an insurgent, plotting a coup from the foundations up. The true construction of the Chamber of Secrets was an act of profound magical heresy. While his partners above practiced a magic of creation, of growth, light, and scholarship, Slytherin's work below was one of stealth and subversion. He did not raise stone, he commanded it to yield. Alone, night after night, he delved deeper, his face cast in the eerie green glow of his own spells. He used a form of magic few had mastered, a Parselton-based enchantment that did not break rock but persuaded it. He would hiss commands, and the stone would shift, parting like a curtain, flowing away to form smooth, tunnel-like walls. It was an unsettling, organic process, as if he were carving a path through the entrails of a colossal living creature. The tunnels he forged were not rough-hewn passages but works of chilling artistry. They coiled and twisted, mimicking the movement of a great serpent. And everywhere, he began to carve his mark. The image of the snake appeared on walls, on archways, on the great circular door that would seal the chamber's entrance. This was his domain, and he left no doubt as to its master. While this subterranean kingdom grew, the man himself began to change. His isolation deepened. He became more gaunt, his eyes holding a feverish, proprietary gleam. Godric Gryffindor, his oldest friend, was the first to truly notice. He saw the stone dust that sometimes clung to Slytherin's robes, the faint scent of deep earth that followed him. He saw the exhaustion that no amount of sleep seemed to cure. "You keep strange hours, Salazar," Gryffindor might have said, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword, his gaze searching. "The castle's pipes require that much attention." Slytherin's replies would be curt, dismissive. "The foundations must be perfect, Godric. A flaw at the base will bring the highest tower crashing down." A principle you would do well to remember. The double meaning was lost on no one, least of all Gryffindor. The trust between them was eroding as surely as the stone in the tunnels below. Gryffindor could feel a coldness emanating from the castle's depths, a discordant note in the symphony of its magic, but he could not find its source. Slytherin's work was too well shielded, his intent too well hidden. He was building his fortress of fear right under their noses, a testament to his unmatched cunning and his terrifying, singular vision. A chamber, however grand, is but an empty room. A fortress needs a guardian. A weapon needs a killing edge. As his great work neared completion, Salazar Slytherin embarked upon the most perilous and profane act of his life, the creation of a living engine of death. He would not summon a beast from some other plane, for such a creature could be banished. He would not tame a wild dragon, for its loyalty could waver. No, he would forge a monster from scratch, binding it to his will, his blood, and his very voice. This was alchemy of the darkest sort, a perversion of life-giving magic. The law is specific, a chilling recipe for monstrosity. It began with the egg of a cockerel, a creature of the sun, an emblem of watchfulness and dawn. But this egg was not to be hatched in warmth and light. It was to be incubated by a toad, a creature of damp, dark places, associated with poisons and ancient, chthonic magic. The union of these two symbols, the solar and the subterranean, the pure and the venomous, was a deliberate act of magical corruption. We must envision Slytherin in the deepest sanctum of his chamber, the air thick with the hum of containment spells. He would have handled the glistening, unnaturally shaped egg with a reverence usually reserved for a holy relic. The incantation spoken over it would not have been the lyrical spells of the upper castle. They would have been sibilant, guttural phrases in Parseltongue, words that twisted the very essence of life within the shell. He was not merely enchanting an egg, he was programming the soul of the creature within. He dictated its nature, immense size, a lifespan measured in centuries, skin as impenetrable as enchanted steel. And its two methods of murder, venom of unparalleled potency, and a gaze so lethal it could extinguish the flame of life in an instant. Most importantly, he wove in the ultimate control mechanism. The beast would be born with an innate understanding of Parseltongue. It would not just obey a speaker, it would be an extension of their will, a living vessel for their hatred. As the toad sat upon the egg in the Stygian dark, Slytherin's magic seeped into the developing embryo, turning what might have been a simple cockatrice into something far older, far more powerful, and infinitely more malevolent. He was creating the King of Serpents, a masterpiece of biological warfare, designed for a single, terrible purpose. It was to be his final arbiter, his judge, jury, and executioner, sleeping in the dark until a worthy heir arrived to wake it and cleanse his school. The final schism was inevitable. The philosophical crack between Slytherin and Gryffindor had widened into a chasm that no amount of shared history could bridge. The conflict, simmering for years, finally erupted in the Great Hall, this time before the first generation of students. The debate over blood purity was no longer theoretical, it was policy. Slytherin, emboldened by the secret knowledge of the power he had hidden below, made his final, unyielding demand, that admission to Hogwarts be restricted to those of entirely magical lineage. The other three founders stood against him. The reconstructed dialogue, passed down through portraits and castle ghosts, is stark in its finality. This is a school, Salazar, not a fortress for a chosen few. Gryffindor's voice boomed, his hand resting not on his sword, but on the shoulder of a young, gifted student born of Muggle parents. Courage and talent are the only lineage that should matter within these walls. Slytherin's gaze was like ice. Courage is a fool's virtue when it leads to annihilation. You are inviting the fox into the henhouse, Godric. You are also blinded by your sentimental ideals that you cannot see the dagger aimed at our throats. Rowena Ravenclaw interjected, her voice calm but firm. Wisdom dictates we judge a student by the contents of their mind, not the contents of their veins. Helga Hufflepuff, ever the peacemaker, made a final plea. Salazar, we began this as friends. Do not let this break what we have built together. We can find a way, but Slytherin was beyond compromise. He saw their unity not as strength, but as a foolish pact of weakness. He sneered. You have found your way. I shall find mine. The final confrontation was between the two old friends. You would deny this child, Gryffindor said, his voice low with disbelief, this bright, eager mind, the chance to learn, simply for the crime of her birth. Slytherin's reply was the death knell of their friendship. I would protect our world from the slow poison of dilution and the inevitable betrayal that will follow. It is not a crime, Godric. It is a regrettable flaw. And I will not have this school, my school, we can buy it with that. The bond was shattered. The vote was 3-1. Defeated and ideologically isolated, Salazar Slytherin turned his back on them, his magnificent green robe sweeping behind him. He was a founder no more. But as he walked from the great hall, a cold, triumphant certainty settled in his heart. They had won the argument, but he had already built the final word. His true legacy was not in the towers they could see, but in the tunnels they could not. It was sleeping, and it was waiting. Salazar Slytherin's departure was not the act of a man defeated, but of one who had merely changed tactics. His war for the soul of Hogwarts would now be fought across centuries, a battle of attrition waged by a monster and an heir. Before he left the castle for the last time, he descended into his chamber for a final inspection. The air was frigid, the silence absolute save for the faint, rhythmic dripping of water and the almost imperceptible cracking of the great egg in its nesting chamber. The basilisk was stirring. He walked the length of his creation, his hand trailing along the cold, serpentine walls. He stood before the colossal, still unfinished statue of his own face, a monument not to a shared dream but to a singular, unyielding will. This statue was his final masterpiece of concealment and arrogance, a sentinel, a key, and a declaration of eternal ownership. He laid the last of the enchantments, weaving spells of secrecy and misdirection around the chamber's entrance. The location he chose was one of supreme, contemptuous irony, a girl's washroom. A place of cleansing, of mundane utility. Who would ever think to look for a gateway to untold magical power and horror behind a simple sink? It was a sneer in stone and plumbing, a final insult to the idealistic folly of his former friends. Then came the most crucial act. He approached the hatching beast, its embryonic mind open and receptive. He spoke to it, not as a master to a pet, but as a creator to his avatar. He poured his memories, his ideology, his hatred of the Muggle-born, into the creature's nascent consciousness. He hissed the commands that would govern its long existence, to sleep, to wait, to listen for the call of his heir, and upon waking, to kill. To purge the castle. His work complete, Slytherin sealed the chamber. The great stone serpents on the door locked into place, the mechanisms falling silent. He ascended the winding stairs for the last time, emerging into the castle he had helped build but no longer called home. He strode through the corridors, his face an unreadable mask. He offered no grand farewells, only a cold, final glance at Gryffindor. Let them believe he was abandoning his folly. The truth was far more sinister. He was not leaving it behind. He was planting a seed of pure venom in its heart and walking away, confident that, one day, it would blossom. Years bled into decades. Hogwarts flourished, its halls filled with the laughter and chatter of students from all walks of life, a testament to the victory of Gryffindor's vision. Yet, for Godric, the victory felt hollow. Salazar Slytherin was gone, but his absence was a palpable presence, a cold spot in the castle's soul. A shadow lingered where his powerful, dark magic had once been. Gryffindor, now the de facto leader of the school, found himself plagued by a profound and persistent unease. He could not shake the feeling that his former friend's departure had been too simple, too clean. Salazar was not a man to simply walk away from a project he considered his own. He was a man who planned, who schemed, who always ensured he held a final, hidden card. The first whispers of the Chamber of Secrets began then, not as history, but as a ghost story. A legend passed between students in hushed tones after curfew. They spoke of a hidden room, built by Slytherin, that housed a monster only his true heir could control. The details were fantastical, distorted by rumor and time, yet Gryffindor heard in them a terrifying echo of the truth. He recognized the shape of his old friend's ambition, his obsession with lineage, his capacity for creating terrible things in the name of preservation. He began to search. In his spare moments, he would walk the castle, his hand on the stone walls, trying to sense the magical void he felt. He explored the dungeons, tapped on flagstones, questioned the ancient house elves who had served since the beginning. But Slytherin's work was too perfect. The enchantments of concealment were flawless, the entrance hidden behind such layers of ingenuity and misdirection that it was invisible to all who did not know the secret. Gryffindor found nothing. No hidden doors, no secret passages, only the cold, unyielding stone of the castle he had helped to build. The failure haunted him. The weight of not knowing what Salazar had truly left behind settled upon him, aging him more than any battle. He had won the war of ideas, but he feared he had lost something far more important. He feared that his brother-in-arms had managed to embed a permanent, poisonous flaw into the very foundations of their dream, a threat that he was now powerless to find or to fight. The legacy of Salazar Slytherin is therefore twofold. There is the legacy of stone and spell, the magnificent castle he helped raise from the earth. But there is a second, darker legacy, one that slumbers in the cold, damp dark. The Basilisk is more than a mere monster, it is a philosophy given physical form. It is the living embodiment of his doctrine of purity, a creature whose very existence is an argument written in venom and death. Its centuries-long sleep, sustained by the deep, ambient magic of the castle itself, is a testament to the patience of its creator's hatred. Slytherin knew he might lose the battle with his fellow founders, but he was determined to win the war for Hogwarts' future. The Basilisk was his ultimate contingency. It is an instrument of magical eugenics, a biological weapon designed to lie dormant for generations, waiting for a political and social climate ripe for its activation. Its purpose is not random slaughter, but targeted assassination, a cleansing fire to burn away the impurities Slytherin so despised. The tragic irony is almost poetic in its cruelty. Hogwarts was founded as a haven, a place to protect young witches and wizards from a world that feared and persecuted them. Yet, within its very foundations, its most brilliant and paranoid architect planted a guardian that would, in turn, persecute and hunt students based on the circumstances of their birth. The sanctuary contained its own antithesis. The protective walls that kept the dangers of the outside world at bay concealed a far more insidious threat within. It is a perfect, self-contained tragedy. The dramatic irony is inescapable for us, the historians looking back. We know of the whispers that turned to screams, of the petrified bodies, of the young girl's life lost in a washroom. But in the context of the 10th and 11th centuries, the Basilisk was merely a potentiality, a prophecy sleeping in the rock. It was the final, unspoken word in a bitter argument between friends, a word that would not be heard for nearly 1,000 years. Its silence was, for a time, the most terrifying thing of all. And so we are left, not with a simple tale of a villain and his monster, but with a far more troubling and complex portrait of a fallen visionary. The question that echoes down through the centuries, carried on the cold drafts of the dungeons, is this: was Salazar Slytherin a monster from the beginning, his noble intentions merely a mask for his prejudice? Or was he a true protector, a man so traumatized by the persecution of his kind that his methods for ensuring their survival became monstrous? Perhaps the truth is that he was both. A brilliant architect of magic, whose profound love for his people became twisted by an equally profound fear of the outside world. He sought to build a shield, but in his paranoia, he lined it with spikes pointed inwards. His obsession with legacy led him to create a masterpiece of dark magic, a creature that would ensure his name was never forgotten, but would forever be linked with terror. The Chamber of Secrets is his final monument. It is not a tribute to his part in a shared dream, but a tomb for his own corrupted one. Down in the silent dark, where the only sound is the slow drip of water like a clock ticking off the centuries, the stone serpents guard their secret. The great carved face of Slytherin watches over his slumbering weapon, his stone eyes cold and resolute. The greatest danger to the dream of Hogwarts was not the Muggles with their torches and pitchforks. It was one of its own. It was a founder who loved his creation so fiercely that he was willing to poison its heart to save its soul. This is the ultimate tragedy of Salazar Slytherin, not that he was evil, but that he was, in his own mind, a savior, and the salvation he offered was a thing of unimaginable horror.